Coming to a new country is all about the hope for a better tomorrow. Whether they were young girls, mature women, or the unborn daughters in the wombs of their own brave mothers, they came with a faith they could make their own dreams come true for themselves and their families. These mothers loved their sons through their childhood years, nurturing and nourishing, while they themselves grew as now Italian American women, getting whatever limited education they could, working with their husbands to grow the family business, and sometimes assuming the entire responsibility to fill the role of their departed husbands. Because of their care and attention, their determination, these mama's boys grew up and became mama's men and now share their stories with you.
My mom was a force of nature. She had some of the most interesting child rearing techniques that you could ever imagine. She was a terrible cook, I'm told, when she started out, but she was a fantastic cook as years went on. And I don't remember her ever putting up a bad meal. Creative and religious. It was handed to her by her parents. She was first generation. First generation's Italians in my parents' generation, they were looked at as being a half step above African American in those days. So my mother raised us without teaching us Italian, which is a sad, sad thing. I'm fluent in Spanish. I'm studying Italian, but it was interesting that she buried her culture because she didn't want her sons to go through that same sort of persecution. And my mother's mother was very quiet, not demonstrative in any way. I think that's what made my mother so outgoing about showing her love and care, for everybody. And my aunt, my oldest aunt, is a little more quiet, and my mother's younger sister, my other aunt, she's kind of my favorite. She's nutty too. She's great. She's outgoing, But yeah, I mean, mom was always there. But my mother was just focused, always. I think I got my work ethic from both my parents. I watched my father support the family, but I watched my mother's focus on whatever it was she wanted or she wanted us to do, and so I learned. I learned how to pursue that objective by virtue of watching her focus and move forward in her own life. I would say thoughtfulness. In my family, you listened all year so that you could buy the right Christmas present or the right birthday present. Which is really funny because my wife comes from a California ennui family. They don't care about those events. They'll buy you a book. I go, don't buy me a book. I hate to read, But my mother was always like, laser focused, listening to get the right thing, And that taught my brother and I a lot because, the girlfriends that we had before, our wives, were never disappointed, we were there, we listened, and we go, oh yeah, that's it, that's what I'm gonna get, wait, so that was cool. And but you know what, she always sang out in church and everything else, but she did not, oh my God, she couldn't carry a tune in a bag, but didn't care, which is, I think, too, also where both my brother and I got some of our lack of inhibition at times, I mean, I never thought that I'd become an actor, but I had some stage fright when I was younger. My mother had, my brother and I played the accordion. I played the accordion from age 4. Did you too? Yeah. So I remember one time I was doing an interview, I think it was Esquire or something, and the interviewer said, what was the worst piece of counsel you ever got? And I said, well, don't tell anybody, but when I was 14, I'd been playing the accordion for 4 years, for 10 years. And I said to my mother, I don't want to play the accordion anymore, I want to play the guitar. She said, "Oh, honey, the guitar is just a fad instrument. The accordion is a contemporary instrument and will always be popular." Okay. So, she didn't realize that, she was just happy to be mentioned in the article. She didn't realize that her counsel was not so good at the time. But, so we all played the accordion. I had such stage fright when I was younger that I used to play in the kitchen, under the table, for my relatives in the living room. Now, the accordion, my legs got caught in the bellows and all that, but she made sure we lugged, when she couldn't do it anymore, or when we were big enough at least, we lugged that accordion up 2 flights of steps to Tempo Music Center in Dover, New Jersey, every Wednesday, and that was her focus. That's what she wanted us to do, and we did it. And I had great appreciation for music, and I probably quit at the wrong time because I was just getting into theory and stuff. But I was in high school. I wasn't going to play the accordion in front of my friends in the 60s. Get out of here. So I figured out a way to diffuse her anger. She'd start yelling at me, right? And she'd want to hit me, and I'd run away, right? And I'd run around throughout the house, and then I'd let her catch me on the stairs, and I'd turn around and I'd go, "Come on, Mom, please," and make some stupid face. And she'd start laughing, and she couldn't hit me. She couldn't hit me. But I'd make sure she was a little tired first. I'd run around the house and make a face. And that was it. I said, "Oh, mille grazie per tutti. You did great."
I never called my mother ever by her name, ever. It was always Ma or Mama or Mommy. And, it's that maternal instinct in her that she always knew, based on how I called her, what I needed. I don't know how mothers know these things. Instinctually, they know these things. But I was like, "Hey, Ma," she knew that was very, or if it was like, "Ma," she knew by the way I called her what I needed. Bedtime prayers were something that were very important to my mom. She wanted to make sure that we said our prayers, but before we said our prayers, we brushed our teeth, we washed our face, we washed our hands. A clean house, a clean mind, a clean body really was a way to just, I think, extend what she wanted us to really emulate as children. And I can remember often when I was a young boy, probably 3, 4 years old, kneeling at my bedside. Wasn't doing prayers, just saying a prayer. Knelt down at our bedside before we went into bed and said our evening blessings, and really bringing back fond memories right now as you ask me this question. Growing up, religion was the backbone of everything for our family. My mother wanted to make sure that not only did we get a good education, but that we received a Catholic education. So, I'm a graduate of Our Lady Mount Carmel, went there kindergarten through 8th grade, graduate of St. Edward High School. And those values that I learned in K through 12 at Catholic schools really helped and prepared me for college. Many of the lessons that I learned, I apply to daily in my work now as a member of council for the city of Cleveland. And religion was very important. We never missed Sunday Mass and religious holidays, special functions. I can still fondly remember some of the people often will affiliate or associate with the Catholic Church, the traditional Easters and Christmas, but one of my favorite is St. Joseph's Day. St. Joseph's Day is a wonderful celebration where the community comes together. We would go to Mass. The Mass is said in Italian, and then every family member brings a specialty dish from their hometown back in Italy. So my mom would often bring several dishes over the years, and we would share and fellowship. It's such a wonderful tradition, and I'm glad today it still occurs at Our Lady of Mount Carmel Parish. Well, I had two amazing grandmothers, both very different, both mighty. My grandma Constantino, she was all of about 4'10". She was a dynamo. She never drove. She lived at 1324 West 65th, and she would walk every day a block and a half south up to West 65th and Franklin. There used to be an old Pick and Pay store there because my grandmother had a very small refrigerator. And in those days, they shopped daily. They shopped for fresh products, and the menu changed based on what was available. She was such an amazing individual. She made the most amazing pizzas. She would make this white garlic pizza and this red pizza. Oh, I can taste it right now, even though I haven't had it in probably 30 years. And she was just a tremendous woman who spoke very little English, broken English. But back in those days, we were able to communicate. I speak a little bit, not very well, but I knew a lot more back then because I spoke it more frequently. And she was just an amazing woman. My grandmother on the Zone side, my grandma Elizabeth Zone, Zia Bettina, we used to call her, was an amazing woman who she lived at 1335 West 65th. So my two grandparents grew up across the street from one another at Caddy Corner, and they became fast friends. And my Zia Bettina she was such an amazing cook and home care provider. She was not only well, stop, and I was on a row there. I'll blank up. So you can splice that in, right? Okay, great. So my grandma Zona, she was an amazing woman, and she was a seamstress. She was such an amazing seamstress that people would come from all over the neighborhood to have her make shirts, pants, suits. She did everything custom out of her house because she learned those trades working at the old Joseph and Feiss. And she was a seamstress. She was such an amazing seamstress that people would come from all over the neighborhood to have her make shirts, pants, suits. She did everything custom out of her house because she learned those trades working at the old Joseph and Feiss on West 53rd, just south of Lorraine. The interesting thing is my grandmother worked there for 40 years, and she organized the first labor union at that plant, the textiles workers, and she was one of the main organizers that helped unionize that shop so they got fair living wages at the time, more hospitable working conditions. And I think the activism that all of us have inherited, my father as an elected official, my mother, myself, some of that traces back to my grandmother. Can you imagine a trailblazing woman back in the 30s and 40s organizing a labor union? It was unheard of for a woman to do that. And so she was an extraordinary woman, and I think about her legacy and what she's given to our community is terrific. Oh my God, it's funny. I would go to school some days and people were like, "Oh my God, you stink." She put Vicks Vapor Rub, if I had a cold, all over my chest, my nose, sometimes my back. My clothes would smell of it. And being second youngest of 9 kids, when you have older siblings to rough you up and beat you up, I was always that rough and tumble kid. My mom would often joke, she goes, "You were in ER every other week with a broken bone, a broken finger, you name it, I did it." And I started out early on and learned a very valuable lesson from my parents. I remember I was playing football for Our Lady of Mount Carmel, CYO football. And I was in 5th grade. And since we were a small school, they had 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade boys all playing together because we couldn't field the team. And I'll never forget, it was November, It was a cold practice. It was wet. And I remember one of the big kids like tackled me into a puddle of water, and I was soaking wet, and I come walking home from practice. I was miserable. And I told my mom and my dad, I says, I'm done. I'm going to quit this team. And right there, Mary Zone shot her finger right at me. And my father gave me a pep talk and a lecture. He says, listen, you never start something that you're not going to finish. And he says, you're not going to quit this team. You joined. You must finish. And I'm glad that I listened to their advice, because nowadays I think children are a little soft. You need that tough love sometime. And my mom gave me some tough love, and my father. And I stuck it out that season, had a wonderful time. But I thought about that a lot. In those moments of vulnerability, when you think you can't persevere, I think of that a lot. But I was blessed with playing football, basketball, and baseball 4 years at Our Lady Mount Carmel. I played baseball for 2 years at St. Ed's. I wrestled at St. Ed's. Had a wonderful athletic career in grade school and high school. In college, I didn't focus, but I played intramural sports, basketball and club wrestling. And then in my early 20s and 30s, I played a lot of very competitive softball. We used to travel the country. A lot of the lessons that I learned, again, from my parents instilling in their children extracurricular activity, because when you're in school, it's not only about educating the mind, it's the heart and the soul, and you need to mix around with other people and learn team chemistry. And so my mother always made sure that we were very involved in recreational sports. Subtly, my mom was a master at giving out signals. Sometimes they were hand gestures, sometimes they were stares, but you knew if she did this and bit her fingers, you'd run for the high hills, because she didn't approve. Again, my mom, Mary Zone, velvet glove, but with an iron fist underneath. And I'll never forget this moment. I was 16 years old. I just got my license. I was so happy. About a week after having my license, I backed up the car out of the garage, out of our driveway, and I backed into a pickup truck, which just happened to be my brother-in-law. So not only did I damage her car, but I damaged my brother-in-law's car. And my mother was just furious with me. And so I promised her and I assured her I would not get in another car accident. Well, wouldn't you know, 3 weeks later, after that accident, I was driving southbound on West 65th, just crossing over Lorraine Avenue, and a car turns right in front of me and totals my sister's car. So this is within 3 weeks, now 3 wrecks. And I am just besides myself. The police officer's there. I'm hysterical. I'm crying. I said, look, I can't go home. You don't realize this. My mom, she'll kill me. And he says, well, look, you're not at fault. I said, listen, please, officer, you have to take me home and explain to my mother. So the police officer was kind enough, put me in the back of the car, drove me home, knocked on the door, and I stayed on the side porch because I was just in fear of what she was going to do. And he knocked on the door and says, are you Mrs. Zone? And she said, yes. She says, I want you to know your son was in an automobile accident. And then I just heard screaming and yelling. He says, look, but I want to assure you, it wasn't his fault. And that's why I drove him home, because he was afraid to come home. So we had a good chuckle over it. But knock on wood, I haven't been in a car accident since. And again, I think it's because my mom really expected me to be not only a good driver, a cautious driver, but a responsible adult. And so I love those moments. I think often of her. I was only 11 when my father passed away. And so my mom was not only a mother figure, but she was an influencer. She was my protector, my guardian. She had such a gentle touch and love to her. But I said she had like a velvet glove with an iron fist. You never wanted to cross mom. And she was just this amazing human being who really loved life, loved people. She really helped me understand that public service was not something that you did, it was something that was required. She required us to get involved from an early age. I remember one of my proudest moments. I was 18 years old. I had just graduated high school, and I became a youth coach at Our Lady of Mount Carmel. She was so proud of me, and I can remember working with the young kids at the school at the time, telling some of the stories that I learned from my mother. She inspires me all the time, even though she's not with us, and I really treasure those lessons that I've learned from her. You know, it had to be extremely difficult on my mom to lose her life partner. My mom really only had one boyfriend, that was my dad. They got married at a young age. And then all of a sudden in 1974, she's a widow. The one thing that my mother never did after was date. So from 1974 until the time she died in 2005, she never dated. She said, I only have one love in life. That was Mike Zone. He gave me 9 beautiful children. I have no reason. And the foundation that she established and raising her children, she's a unique woman. They don't make women like that anymore. You know, we live in this quick fix society, instant gratification. My mom was a slow roll, at your pace. You know, take it easy, make sure things are done right. And, you know, she is such an amazing example, and she's been an amazing example to my wife. You know, my wife and I, we dated and started dating in 1984, eventually got married in 1990, but my wife was like a daughter to my mother, and all of the recipes, all of the traditions, everything that my mom did, she wanted to make sure she passed that down to my wife, Michelle. And so my wife is an amazing cook. And she's learned all those traditions from Mary Zone. And, you know, I think about when we're having holidays and my wife's making these specialty dishes, I think about Mary Zone. And she knew back then, you know, I'm going to pass this on down. So I have the smile on my face because I think about often when I was sick, how my mom, again, I said she had this velvet glove, such a gentle, loving touch. And she always knew the right things to do and how to make you feel better. And when you were sick, she would just fuss over you. Now, if you weren't sick, you weren't getting any sympathy from that woman. But if you were sick, oh my God, did she fuss over you. And I would ask her to make my favorite soups or whatever I asked. She would make a specialty dish. You know, I've had some tragic things happen to me over the years, and my mom was always right there by my side to soothe me, make me feel safe and secure and welcome, and such an extraordinary woman. My mom had all these homemade remedies, and I'll tell you probably the funniest story of my mom. My wife and I, we only have one child, and so our son was born. He was teething, and so my wife was very particular about hygiene and cleanliness and how you took care of our son. And I remember one day we're over at my mom's house, and Michelle's like, he's crying all the time, his teeth are hurting. And my mom says, I got a remedy. I know how to take care of that. I'll fix it. So she walks out of the room. She comes back with a bottle of whiskey. And she put a shot glass on the table, and she poured the whiskey in. She goes, give me that kid. And she grabs him, puts him on the lap, stuck her finger in the whiskey, and start rubbing the gums. Well, meanwhile, my wife is just hysterical. No, you can't put alcohol in him. She goes, you kidding me? I did that with all my kids. And soon thereafter, he stopped crying. He was fine. And again, you know, these remedies that these Italian women had were able to figure out how to solve problems. And so, yeah, that was another way of how she was taking care of our child when he wasn't doing so good. Oh, it's absolutely sauce. It's not gravy. Gravy is what you put on mashed potatoes. You know, gravy is a New Jersey invention. I know this well. I will tell you the same sauce that we make today is the same sauce that my grandmother made. My mom made sure that my wife, Michelle, every time she made sauce, she sat with her, the ribs and the pork, and you know, there's a combination of different meats in there, but she made it the same way. That was one thing that would infuriate my mom. She goes, "That's a Jersey thing. Gravy, that was something invented. That's an East Coast thing." But you know, even going back to Italy, we had this life-changing experience. My wife and I spent 17 days last year in Italy, and we traveled the country. And I remember having this conversation with my Aunt Armida and my Uncle Ennio, and they were like, "Gravy? I don't know gravy. It's sauce." So it's absolutely sauce.
I'm Charlie Tardivo. I currently live in Lakewood, Ohio, formerly from the Boston area. I am a Bostonian. I follow all my Boston sports teams. And we're here to talk about my mother, which is a near and dear to my heart topic. Despite the fact my mom and dad separated and eventually divorced when I was a senior in high school. But she always encouraged me to, and he stayed with his mother in Boston, and so I would visit him on every Sunday, me and my sister, when I was able to drive. And but she would just want us to continue. There was never animosity. And he had a gambling problem, and you know, that was the kind of thing. He loved her till the day he died, and so I know his feelings for her. He knew he screwed up. So I just remember the closeness. In the first decade of the 1900s, life in Sicily was pretty rugged, pretty tough. So my grandfather came to this country to make money, and actually he did pretty well. He worked for an ice cream factory, did a variety of things, and accumulated some funds to go back and get my grandmother, who was about maybe 6 or 7 years younger than he was. And so he came over, and there were other family members of his that had come over during that period of time. Sicily was just a very difficult place to be, earn a living, and I think everyone had the American dream. He was here. There was an earthquake in Sicily that killed his mother, father, and his younger sister. And he missed it because he was here, and he went back, after working here for a while, he went back to Italy to get my grandmother. But that, so we went back to Sicily, Mary and I, about 7 or 8 years ago, with an abbreviated version of the family tree to see if we could find some distant relatives. And from the best of my knowledge, I think most of the family left during that decade, and there really weren't many folks left behind, unless they were distant cousins.